So from what Mr. N.Ram said, BJP trying to capture the media. So on the assumption that even if BJP achieves to capture the media, Tamil Nadu is unique for the fact that we have one of the highest internet penetration in India. And it's also parallel to the Western standards. Literacy rate is also much higher than rest of India, and also the critical thinking and so on and so forth is much higher. So based on this, I want to ask Yulia, what do you think? Even let's assume that BJP tries to capture the media in Tamil Nadu with such high internet penetration to the Western levels. Do you think such narratives can hold?
The question is for me? Yeah.
Yes.
So the first thing I really want to highlight is that unfortunately this is really not specific to India, even as of today. If you look at what is happening in a number of countries, let's say for example the US, you don't have a direct capture of the different media outlets by a political party, let's say by the Republican Party, but indirectly, since through support of the Republican Party, Rupert Murdoch, for example, through Fox News, or the Sinclair media group as of today that had bought a lot of local TV. At the end of the day, the consequences are kind of similar. You have to know that in France, in 2 weeks and a half from now, we are going to have presidential elections, and one of the candidates that can make it to the second round of the election is a radical right candidate who did not exist basically 1 year ago, and who was put on stage by one TV channel, CNews, and one billionaire, Vincent Bolloré, owning the TV channels, and who use all this money and media outlets to make sure that this candidacy was going to be a success. So it is not, as if we had a perfect solution to ensure that a given party or some politicians won't capture the media. The problems are the same in a number of different countries under different forms. They can be more or less discrete, but basically we all have the same issues. If you want to limit that, of course, you may want to change the law. There are different ways to change the law. It's not always very easy. I think I'm trying to work more and more with Indian data, and I've worked a little bit with government advertising data in India, government advertising to newspapers. I think for sure one of the things that that we need to be done is basically to put an end to this direct link between the government and newspapers. Again, this is not specific to India. The use of government advertising on media content has been very well documented in the 2000 in the case of Argentina. More recently during the COVID crisis, it has also been super well documented in the case of Greece, where you had a lot of Greek newspapers very close to the Greek government that were receiving a lot of subsidies, while other newspapers with more readers were not at all. So that, I think we need to find a way no longer to have government advertisement in newspapers, or to do it through some other channels, so that it is done let's say just depending on the circulation of the newspapers, but you don't want to keep a direct financial link. You need to better regulate also press subsidies. But now we are talking about the BJP, and I think there is also a responsibility of the other parties, because the other parties, when they would be back to power, and in particular, I guess when the MPs from other parties would be elected, they have to commit to better regulate the media industry. What is happening today is also happening today because of the lack of regulations that could have been introduced years or decades ago. So they are taking advantage of a system that is not enough regulating, and of a system in which, given the increasing competition from a number of other players, increasing penetration of the internet, some people say, oh, now we no longer need to regulate legacy media outlets because we have competition stemming from all around the world. This is not true. People are still informed a lot through legacy media outlets. Even those people who rely on social media. A lot of what is on social media is content that is actually produced to begin with through legacy media outlets. And the last point, but it was raised before, is the fact of saying that at the end of the day, it's not also so easy to regulate social media. And in particular, you don't want the government to be in charge of the regulation, because then it can be just a tool to limit freedom of expression. So we can have a very pessimistic view of the current situation. And again, when I say the current situation, it's not only in India, it's like the same in my home country, like in France. Or we can have like a kind of a, so it won't be like an optimistic view, but at least say that, okay, now there is something we can do. Like, this is time to do better regulation. There is a lot of things to do. There are plenty of ideas. I heard like a lot during this discussion just in 1 hour. But that's true that we need to mobilize the people in favor of that. And I just want to conclude with that. The main issue, I think, in a number of countries now is the fact that people, they do not like the journalist overall. And when you look at trust in different institutions, trust in the media is very low. And I think the only profession that people like less than journalists are the politicians. So when you want to do a program, when you want to push, some laws in favor of like journalism independence, more public funding for good information, more public funding for the production of high quality news, it's kind of super hard, because people, they say, why would we help the media industry? The media industry is captured. But the media industry is captured because it's not regulated. So I think we need, it's a little bit like for the environment, climate change. Climate change, now things are happening because you have like so many people that push in favor of it, in particular young people, that politicians, they need to do something. I think we need also to tell people that today we have a key problem with information. And when information is at risk, it's not that we care about journalists per se, but as citizens, even if we were completely selfish, we should care about the information we are given to consume. And we need to better regulate the media industry, because at the end of the day, what it's going to impact the quality of news that is available for each of us as a citizen.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Julia. I understand that you have to leave right now. And merci pour la participation. And as a matter of fact, me, ASP, and Pugal, we would be coming to Sianspo on the April 11th and 12th. So ASP has written this very interesting book on life of Kalaniya Karunanidhi, one of the tall leaders of our party. And so we are visiting UK, France, Oxford, SYS, King's. We have already written to Christophe Jeffrolet, and he is willing to host us in Paris one day, and the next day we'll be going to Le Havre, the Asia campus. So if you're around, then we could also catch up in Paris on the 11th or the 12th.
Yeah. Yeah, I would love to. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci.
Jai Shankar, you could go ahead with your question.
Yeah, I am Shankar here. Appreciate Dharani and Pugal for bringing some impressive speakers for this program, and special thanks to PTR for forming this platform where we could discuss key issues. Okay, with this, two of the best journalists I always love, Siddharth and Ram, are there in this session. So I'd like to ask the question. Okay, these days when propaganda comes dressed as news, and tech platforms like Google, FB, Twitter, and even recently LinkedIn is helping amplify such propaganda, while WhatsApp and Instagram is helping the last mile delivery of the content. It is visibly evident these tech companies are always playing lackeys to authoritarian regimes anywhere across the world by just playing a token lip service for democracy and free speech. Otherwise, they tag along with the authoritarian regime. We have seen this. So with this backdrop, my question is, how do you see companies like Google, Facebook, Twitter investing in in the name of modern journalism for news platforms or news aggregators, and even running incubation programs or some scholarship programs? FB is partnering with Geo. Google, which is the largest search engine, is trying to invest in creating content And is this not an evil nexus of internet service provider, distribution platforms, news creators coming into one entity and tagging along the authoritarian regimes? How do we address this? While we keep opposing visible threat to journalists, are we blind to increasingly evident nexus of ISP tech media investments? Especially the checks and balances, something like what the Hindu has, reader's editor, is not possible in the new age media distribution. So how could an ideology driven, okay, this is my question. How do we approach this?
Should I try?
Yes, please
Should
go
I
ahead.
try to answer that?
Yes, please.
No, I think that's a question. Yeah, that's a great question, Jaishankar. I think you flagged an important point. I would say the problem actually goes well beyond the actual or potential nexus between big tech and authoritarian regimes. Because even if you didn't have that as an additional factor of concern, the sheer weight of monopoly power that these companies can wield, especially if they expand horizontally and vertically across every dimension of the information game, every dimension of the public sphere. This is something which is deeply problematic because that's simply too much of power in the hands of a handful of companies. And regulators around the world are waking up to the dangers that this poses. There is, in India, perhaps in a limited way, the Competition Commission, what used to be earlier the TPC, Restrictive Trade Practices Commission. Now the Competition Commission is looking at complaints about Google's monopoly position vis-a-vis the aggregation of news and the fact that they keep a lion's share of advertising income that is actually earned off the backs of media organizations that create this content, right? So I think regulators are looking at different manifestations of this monopoly power. We have the parliamentary committees, I think IT committee, attempting to look at the role of Facebook. In the European Union, in Australia, in the US, there is growing concern about these companies. You know, frankly, as a digital news platform, I see the upside of this big tech is that I have access to a distribution network that lets me reach millions of people quite easily with very little financial burden on myself, right? In the old days, if one had started The Wire, say, as a broadcast or a print venture, scaling up to reach millions of readers as we do currently would have been next to impossible without investment of crores and crores of rupees. We launched The Wire with the initial and total paid up capital of 6 lakh rupees. And it was, you know, the digital economy with all the evil, you know, that big tech monopolies have caused, which allowed us to do that. So even as we have benefited, I think it's important that we ourselves be aware of the limitations of that. And you can see, you know, for example, this takes us perhaps slightly off topic, but I tweeted about this and it concerns me a great deal that in the context of the Russia-Ukraine war, it's become virtually impossible to access a channel like RT for all its faults, right? I mean, like I know what RT is. It's a government channel. It's a Russian government channel. But I find it a bit disturbing that YouTube has blocked it, Facebook has blocked it, Twitter has blocked it. And in other words, they have decided that this is not legitimate journalism and we're not going to expose readers anywhere in the world to this. And it's very clear to me that today they've done this for RT. Many people around the world may feel that's a legitimate reason Russia shouldn't have invaded Ukraine, etc. I fully with those who have condemned the invasion. But if at the flick of a switch, big tech can block access, can prevent RT from distributing its content, then tomorrow any media platform anywhere in the world can become a target of this, either because these companies themselves decide, or as you say, that these companies have a nexus with authoritarian regimes. So tomorrow, what's to prevent a situation where the government of India instructs these channels or these distributors that please ensure that wire is no longer available. And these companies which are not accountable to the people of India, will take a decision based on their cost-benefit calculus. And if the stakes are large enough vis-a-vis the government of India or any other government and any other, digital platform that government doesn't like, then they may well take the decision that we're going to kill this. So the strategy for us, because the question really is what can we do? Our strategy is to try to maximize and build on reader loyalty, reader commitment, so that readers create a habit of coming to us directly and not necessarily through social media referrals. But this is an uphill battle, and that danger always remains. And I'm not comfortable with the kill switch being in the hands of some big tech guy sitting in Palo Alto, sitting in California, or anywhere in the world for that matter, who will take a decision on what people can access or not access based on profit and loss calculations. That's not healthy. So as long as it exists, we try to use it to the best way we can. But the danger of the unbridled power of big tech, and particularly their horizontal and vertical expansion, is something which we need to be very, very alert to. So I think your question is spot on, but I'm sorry I don't have an answer to how you deal with that. I think this is work in progress as far as we are concerned.
Thank you, Siddharth. Mr. Ram, do you want to go at it?
Yeah, I agree with that largely. Yes, on the one hand, the media do benefit, but these so-called tech companies, which claim we are not publishers, dodge any kind of accountability. Now, of course, there is pressure on them to be accountable, and some countries have done better than others. For example, Germany, they steal news content. So there are attempts to make their lives a little more difficult, but they do threaten free speech. They do facilitate dissemination on a huge scale of hate speech, hate messages, racism, communalism, and so on. And sometimes, of course, you point it out, they may take it off, but that's a very small portion of what circulates on the social media. And we know that India is one of the top users. There are more Facebook users in India than anywhere else. Similarly for WhatsApp. So we've taken to it in a big way. And authoritarian rulers in India have really capitalized on it. This is a fact. And we know that when these complaints went, what was Facebook's response to, they discriminated between toxic messages put out by the ruling party and comparable messages put out by others. This was also widely reported. But the large point is they play a game on the side of the United States and Western powers. And there are a number of instances to illustrate this. They are part of the strategy, the strategic goals of the United States and the other countries, because to some extent they are independent entities, but when there's a huge movement, take for example Ukraine. I also believe that the invasion of Russian invasion of Ukraine is very unfortunate, was bad, has been brutal, has brought brutal consequences. But how much coverage have we seen? Even in places like the BBC and of course on the social media that discuss Russia's legitimate concerns about NATO's relentless eastward expansion, for example. Those are very, very few articles. Maybe they take it for granted. Very few serious discussions, arguments based on how Russia should have got a better deal on this and so on. Very little intelligent discussion on trying to explain why India has taken a position that it's sort of neutral or it abstains. India, not only India, but several other countries, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, UAE, a number of others, go into the reasons why they take a somewhat different stance and so on. The social media, the big tech companies have little tolerance for this kind of discourse, allowing space for this kind of thing. So I think they are a serious threat to freedom of speech and expression in that sense, and to a proper, providing equal opportunities or reasonable opportunities for people with different viewpoints to have it out, to have a discourse, a reasoned discourse. Also, they are very opportunist. You saw that Trump was outrageous, but it was only when it was clear that you had lost the presidential election that Twitter sort of knock him out of their space, and Facebook also. And I can bet that if Trump returns as president, he will still have, that kind of access will be restored. So there's a great deal of opportunism here. It's a huge subject, but I think the harm that they do clearly outweighs the whatever benefit society gets or the news media get, or which help the free flow of information and so on. So the earlier romanticization about citizen journalism, I think, has faded, is no longer the same, because today I think the pandemic has shown that professional journalism is what you really need. Professional journalism which is ethical, which is independent, which is in a sense scientific, in the sense that Walter Lippmann spoke about it. What objectivity means. Objectivity doesn't mean just neutrality. Objectivity means you follow the scientific method and so on. I think these are the values that we need to return, and the big tech companies have very little time and tolerance for this sort of thing. But what do you do about it? I'm equally perplexed about this, at a loss for answers, because they are so huge in comparison with media organizations, in terms of wealth, in terms of resources, in terms of the share of the ad revenues they corner, that it is very difficult. But may I also mention something about which Panneerselvan raised about self-regulation? If there's a question about it, maybe you can raise it.
I'm not sure what the questions are, but sir, can you extend for more 7-8 minutes? Because I think there are 3 questions more. Is it okay? I think we're supposed to end in 90 minutes, so I think we might extend by 7-8 minutes. If that's okay for all, then we can continue. Yeah. Okay. So based on what you said, sir, we need more journalists. Of course, I think I can't deny we need more journalists. We need more quality journalists. We need best minds to study journalism, and only then they could best minds as well as with integrity and passion and so on and so forth. So, but for that, we need to be able to provide them jobs, good jobs. But across the world, journalistic jobs are on the decline. For example, the Hindu has not had a replacement for reader's editor, who is also ASP. So I think there's a paradox here, right?
Very unfortunate. Yeah.
Yes. What is the solution for such a situation? Because it's a chicken and egg problem, right? So.
Yes, I think you have to find the right person, and you have to have the right commitment to it. And that's so that's a work in progress. Panneerselvan was, in my opinion, the best readers editor we've ever had. In fact, I initiated it, learning from The Guardian. When Alan Rusbridger and Ian Mays came here, we announced this. We had a 1, 2, 3 so far, right, Paneer? And I think they each did their job, but it's a very demanding job. And as somebody mentioned, with the digital media, it's going to be extremely difficult for the reader's editor to keep an eye, or one or even a team, to keep an eye on what needs to be fixed, what needs to be monitored. But it is an excellent mechanism. It's only one of the mechanisms that constitute self-regulation. But if at that level you minimize mistakes and malpractices in journalism, or at least blow the whistle on them, then I think that helps. But self-regulation is important. I used to believe that the Leveson model, the model that came out of the Leveson inquiry in the United Kingdom, provided an excellent solution. What is that model? An independent self-regulatory body underwritten by statute. I thought that was excellent, because if you merely leave it to the media, it may not amount to very much. This was my apprehension. So underwritten by statute. But today, given the trends that we see in India, and given the ways of the central government and certain other governments, particularly the right-wing governments, I would hesitate very much to have this government have any kind of role, or even Parliament to have any kind of role in shaping this self-regulatory mechanism. It is very specific to the Indian situation, my comment. But I think media houses, media organizations have to do very well, have to do much more to strengthen these practices. One, at the level of by whatever name called an independent ombudsman, preferably full-time, but anyway, able to do the job, concentrating on significant things, not every little error that happens, some proof mistake and so on, but every significant mistake or malpractice, of course. I think the independent ombudsman is a valuable resource. Why valuable? Could be a valuable player. And then above that, you need to have an industry-wide, in the organization itself, a code of ethics, the code of professional ethics, which is publicized, which is where it's published for everyone to see, so that they can see whether the media organization and the people working for it are able to live up to those high-sounding statements of principles or values. And above that, you need to have an industry-wide self-regulating body. This is my way of thinking. And we do not have it. We do not have it. The Press Council doesn't do that job. The Press Council is considered toothless. It doesn't do its job, even when the press is harassed on the whole. And as for the broadcast media, it's completely, they lack self-regulation, except the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting. They can take them off the air. You saw what happened to Media One, which has won some relief at the Supreme Court, thanks to a particular bench, I think, decided on that after it had lost out in 2 rounds in the Kerala High Court, where there's been a lot of writing on this, criticizing that judgment, the judgment of the division bench, the Kerala High Court. But fortunately, the Supreme Court, it's only interim relief, has done the right thing. So they can take them off the air. Or they can do a number of other things also to make life difficult for news channels, television news channels. We saw that even in Tamil Nadu during the previous government. I agree with the finance minister when he said that after Jayalalitha's time, they were not really authoritarian, but they were quite intolerant when it came to even the Pudiya Talamurai channel and a couple of others. For a while, till we fought there was resistance, there was organized resistance, and I would say we won that particular round. And that practice was stopped even before the election, assembly election.
So thank you. Next we have Bala. Bala, can I go ahead with your question? And have, please be as brief as possible.
Yeah. Can Mr. Ram and Mr. Siddharth please comment about the exodus of journalists from the industry in the recent times? There are many talents who are leaving the industry, and it's not, I mean, it seems not good for the industry. And of course, there'll be people who can replace them, but many are forced to quit the industry due to poor remuneration, work pressure, and lack of time and space to work on critical or investigative stories. Should good journalism happen only at the cost of journalists' well-being? So I had posted this question, so I just wanted to repeat. Thank you. Thank you.
Siddharth, you want to go first?
I'm not sure which one you're talking about. Follow the news, but people. It's not uncommon at various points in time for people to feel disheartened and to leave journalism. And now is that time because it's become difficult for journalists to remain true to their craft and to actually go out there and do the kind of stories that they would very much want to do. So some of them, I suppose, seek refuge in writing books where they are not subject to the capriciousness of proprietors who come under government pressure. So it's unfortunate. I mean, in an ideal world, media organizations, India needs vibrant media organizations where flourish. He explained, I think, in the course of this discussion, why the media scene is not vibrant. You have plenty of exceptions. And I want to underline for any young journalists who are watching this that you need not be overly disheartened by whatever you've heard today or your own assessment, because even in news organizations that are not the greatest and that actually do pretty bad work, you have individuals there who do manage to do whatever little they can. And so I think that journalists have to try to push the envelope wherever they are. There's no reason for us to make it any easier for unethical bosses to push an agenda that's not professional. But at some stage, maybe a journalist feels that it's best if she quits and goes out and does her own thing, maybe writing a book, joining a think tank. That does become journalism's loss. But frankly, unless the overall health of these media organizations themselves improves, I can't see this kind of attrition coming to an end anytime soon.
My impression is I don't see any evidence of any exodus from journalism. There are people you lose, yes, and because I think other organizations have begun to hire, particularly digital startups, and I've had cases where some very good journalists say we are considering moving to this startup and so on. They're taking a bit of a risk, but that is to be expected. Also, there have been salary cuts and the other factors that Siddharth has just mentioned. Proprietors who, or organizations that do not allow these journalists, talented journalists, to function as they should be allowed. That could be one reason, but they're also, it's very complex. Their aspirations may be different. I've known some cases, but I don't think there's any large scale, any significant exodus as I am aware of, at least in this part of the country. On television, you have some excellent senior journalists, editors, who would be snapped up anywhere by other organizations, but they seem to be staying where they are and trying to improve, upgrade their skills, their capabilities. So I think there is plenty of talent there, but it is a challenge because if you are outstanding, if others would want to get you, especially during a period of recovery, when you want to get maybe leaner, but more, you're more quality conscious. And you want to raise your productivity also in terms of number of stories. You want to attract readers and so on. You want some very talented people. So there is competition. But I don't think it's some kind of one-way flow at the moment. There are also people coming into journalism who are good. There are outside contributors who are quite an asset. I think we often forget the fact that a lot of good journalism is done by people from outside the field, who contribute regularly, including, I know, some lawyers. I won't name them here, but I have several names. People who are excellent, who are good writers. They take journalism seriously. There are people who on science and various subjects that they really have come up, they must be considered professional, if not professional journalists, producers of quality professional content. So that sort of compensates for those who may not be full-time journalists, but there is also a section, a small number of outstanding journalists who I'd say are frustrated with the superficiality and dilettantism of journalism as a craft. Very often it is that and if the situation gets worse because of some impropriety, some compromise, unprincipled compromise made by proprietors or by others, then I think it makes the situation worse. But I'm not disheartened by the talent, by the talent, on talent in newspapers. I'm connected with the Asian College of Journalism, and I'm surprised that year after year, very bright young people, in particular women, come. Sometimes we ask them, what brings you to journalism today, which is not the most attractive vocation, not the most paying and so on. And they come with a certain idealism, they come with expectations. Journalism still is attractive for quite a large number of young people. And I think we have to train them, we have to educate them, we have to inspire them, and we have to retain them. But you lose a certain number. I see that with alumni of the ACJ. Some have gone out of journalism, but a very large number of them stay on and contribute in different ways. And I think India is quite fortunate in the kind of talented young people we have in journalism and who are coming even today into journalism. I thought I'll end on that note.
Thank you. So I think there's one more question from Suma Ilagan. So I also have a personal question.
Thank you very much.
Sir, I also have a question, so we can just combine together, and I think we'll with these two questions we will end the event. So I think once the two questions are asked, I think the panelists can reply. Sir, Ram sir, so my question is this. See, this trend is going to continue. So BJP still has two years, and also we don't know what's going to happen in 2024. With the recent electoral victory, they're going to act with more aggression. There are going to be more cases filed on journalistic houses. BJP is aflush with funds. Even in Tamil Nadu, you see a lot of these YouTube channels and small media channels coming up. And I think overall in the country, we know how the judiciary works. There's going to be more attack, even violent attacks on journalists. So what do you think this, in short, is the way forward? Also financial model wise, as well as to get rid of this mess. And Soma Ilangovan, so you can go ahead with your question.
Thank you very much for an excellent discussion. Public perception is the strength and the insurance for journalism.
Sir, you're not audible. Can you?
Can you hear
I
me?
think there's a problem with your mic. Feebly. It's quite feeble.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. In US, they started what is called a lying meter, the number of lies told. That made it very easy for people to understand the situation, what the person is saying. Is there a way something like that can be done in India? Thank you.
Yes, the second question is easy because there are some very good fact-checking websites. One is Alt News. The other, it's run brilliantly with a very small team. And the other is Boom Live. And there may be some others. And also there are media organizations which they have their own fact-checking teams. And I think they're doing a pretty good job. Whether you call them lies or, there are all kinds of euphemisms to characterize lies. They're actually blowing the whistle on falsehoods, sometimes called fake news, but actually it's either misinformation or if it's deliberate disinformation. So I think we do have a basis to call these lies. So it's the same thing. It's the style may be different. You have a style, lies meter, or you can have a fact-checking website which which has to be independent. It has to be objective. Whoever comes out with falsehoods, that has to be exposed. You can't show any preference for one against the other when you do a fact-checking operation. Whether it's the Congress that puts it out or the BJP that puts it out or some other party, you still have to expose it if it is a significant falsehood. And the other question is what?
No, so it was my question. I was asking, this trend is in which we're going to continue.
Yeah, I think we should have confidence in secular democratic politics. It's going to be hard. We also need a reality check. But India is so diverse and so politically diverse that I think we can't. There's no cause for defeatism. Even if the BJP comes to power hypothetically in 2024 for another term with the same team, I think you still have scope for resistance. There'll be state assembly elections, which will go different ways. It's happened recently until the latest round. It did happen. And it did happen in Punjab also. So I think the point is the media are not really independent players. To a large extent, there's not a one-on-one correspondence between media performance and politics, but they bear a close relationship. And I think you can't really escape the socio-political environment in which you perform. That will have a big impact on your performance, on your morale, and so on. So I think hope is in the larger socio-political situation, because you can't fool people all the time. That's my belief. But meanwhile, in a state like Tamil Nadu, we have some very good resources, a very good base. Whatever be your criticism of the Dravidian movement or the various, after it split, the various outfits or the various political parties, one thing is sure, that they have kept the so-called All India parties out of it. And I think that is a big advantage so far as I'm concerned, for many reasons, which we have no time to discuss today. For example, on that book that came out on the Dravidian model, whether you fully accept it or not, I think it makes a strong case for growth with a certain kind of equitable participation or distribution, including of entrepreneurship, opportunities in education, and so on. A certain rational outlook. You shouldn't compromise on that. So I think it's become a big advantage, and the media definitely feed off this and benefit from this. It's not just the Dravidian movement. There are other trends, including on the left, even though it's small. The Congress party has played a role. both positive and negative. But I think overall the situation is very different from most states in the country, and there are a couple of other states as well. So we have to also put our trust in politics, in secular, democratic, progressive politics, for the media to do well.
Sir, thank you so much for your time, and also thank you for giving us an idea for one of our next events, why regional parties are good for Tamil Nadu. Maybe that could be our next event in the future, maybe May, June. And Panneerselvan, so do you want to add something? If at all, otherwise we can end the event.
Throat is really bad.
Don't injure it, because you will cause damage if you force.
Yes.
It.
In that case, we can just end the event. I would like to thank you once again, sir, for coming. We'd like to see you more often in DPF. And Panneerselvan, sir, has always been a vital support for the forum and for our initiatives. Thank you. Thank you so much, both of you. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.